Hey guys, Jack, and welcome back. And we're into European knockout competition. Obviously, Manchester City got a big 3-1 win over FC Copenhagen this week. But we have the likes of Villa, Arsenal, and a few others that are knockouts, and they're going to have to figure out the balance between European competition and obviously the league. And a few of these teams are going for top four, the title. It's a big thing. So it's going to be interesting to see how these teams line up during the weekend. But we got to talk about one of the biggest games of the weekend, which is going to be Manchester City versus Chelsea. While Chelsea have had a full week to prepare, unlike Manchester City, I just don't think they're going to have the best luck in this game. Their home form has been decent, but their away form has been particularly patchy, and they're going to be away at the Ethiad. Chelsea have been really patchy, and that's because of the young team. When you have a set 11 to 14 players, you know exactly what team you're playing, and you kind of develop relationships and chemistry in that regard. While with a young team, you're going to have really high highs and really low lows, and that's been the issue for Pochettino. He can't really rely on someone. Like Thiago Silva has been kind of the only player he's truly relied on. Raheem Sterling hasn't really had a good run of games in recent weeks, and because of it's such a young team, you're not going to have consistent performances. And while we've seen the likes of Nicholas Jackson come back into the side, he is still very patchy, and I think that's going to continue here. And obviously, the issues with Chelsea has been the injuries. I mean, Nkunku has been fit, but he isn't match sharp yet, and they need to really kind of rein him in because we've seen the likes of Ben Chilwell and Reece James struggle with their fitness because they're being rushed back too quickly. And while you can understand why they want to play their best players possible, you can't really do that if you want them to play tens of hundreds of matches for you if they're getting injured after two games because you've rushed them back. So I think it's a really difficult balancing act for Pochettino, and I think he's doing a good job. It is really difficult because of the kind of culture around Chelsea that they've always been champions. They've always gone for trophies. That the fact that they aren't doing that anymore, it's really upsetting a lot of the Chelsea fans. And I get that completely. It's because you're so used to something, and the fact that you kind of have to take a step back, a couple of step backs even, just to get yourself up. Like it isn't great. But you can see a lot of promise in a lot of these players. Obviously, Cole Palmer, we've facing his former club again. Conor Gallagher has been really good despite a huge amount of criticism from fans. And Enzo Fernandez could potentially be coming into form. I think it's a case of just playing him in his correct position. And while I'm heaping praise on them, I just don't think against this Manchester City team they're gonna do particularly well. As I said, their away form has been patchy, and while they've done well against bigger teams, I think it was Arsenal they played last. They just looked, it was Liverpool. They just looked off it completely. I think it's going to be a very difficult game for Chelsea. They could string a surprise or two, but just given the quality of City and the lack of really injuries that they have, I mean, they still have Rodri, De Bruyne, Haaland, who looks back. I think it's going to be a big win for City, and I think they're going to play one of their stronger teams. I'm going to go with a 4-1 win. Brentford will be glad that they're getting a few of their players back. Vissa, who hasn't been great this season, it's just good to have a body like that back. And with Ivan Toney and Neil Maupay developing quite a good partnership, they could cause trouble for Liverpool, especially at the G-Tech. Liverpool, on the other hand, they are still looks like they're going to be getting Endo back, and while Salah is set to be out for another few weeks, you've seen the likes of Darwin Nunez, Jota just do really well last week, especially if you saw the goals. They were great headers from the two of them. And Luis Diaz who got one. I think they look really good going forward, but we see how Brentford can be very stingy, and they have a lot of aerial presence. I mean, the back line, like Pinnock, Ben Mee are really good in the air, and while they're still struggling with a lot of injuries, especially to key players, Sergio Reguilon has looked really good, and while it's still very early and he is still learning the system, and I think it's going to rely on moments. Again, I know I keep saying this all the time, but when you see I think it's going to be set pieces really for Brentford if they're going to get any success from this game. I think Ivan Toney is going to make it really difficult for Van Dijk, and I presume it'll be Konate or even Jarell Kwanzaa who will just partner him. As I said, it will be a difficult game, but I think Liverpool will just scrape through this with a 2-1 win. Arsenal go into this game in great form, having beaten West Ham 6-0. And while I don't think they're going to have the same type of scoreline this game, I think they will comprehensively beat Burnley. Burnley have just looked really poor, kind of keeping goals out. And I think they've in fairness been more pragmatic recently. I just don't think they're going to have enough against this Arsenal team who have a very fluid front line. And I think just with how Burnley sometimes set up defensively, I just don't think it's going to be enough. I think it's going to be a simple 2-0 win for Arsenal. I think Gary O'Neill is going to make this really difficult for Spurs. While it is going to be at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, I think Spurs are going to have a really difficult challenge, and they only really scraped a 2-1 win against Brighton last week. And while their performances have been really good, their results have been quite patchy. I think it's credit to Postecoglou that he sticks with his system, and when they're behind, they don't really panic and they continue to play the way that they do. But against this Wolves team, they're going to really be challenged here. Pedro Neto, it looks like he's being kind of looked at for potential move in the summer, and I wouldn't be surprised if Spurs take a look at him as well. I think it'll just be a huge financial outlay, and considering how much they spend on Brendan Johnson, who seems to be coming into form, I don't think it's going to be. I think it's going to be the best idea. They're going to probably have to look at the midfield or maybe a potential another striker. With Wolves, they definitely are going to need to set up a bit defensively because how well Tottenham can play, and Tottenham have a lot of their players back. I mean, we saw Sarr come in and score, Bissouma come in. Like, they have a lot of players back, and just even despite with Wolves they've looked a bit patchier in defence recently, I think it could be a really good 3-1 win to Spurs. Both teams have been in great form here, and I think that's going to continue. It's going to be a kind of a dull game. Fulham have looked a lot better in terms of kind of really comprehensive performances, but they haven't really got the results. And it's been really a case of converting their chances, similar to what Chelsea have been dealing with. While Aston Villa, they haven't looked great. I think ever since even in the loss against Chelsea, they didn't look as kind of sound. And as I said in the last video, I don't know whether it's because they've been figured out or fitness is coming into it. And when they have Europa Conference League this week, I don't know if they're going to be fully focused on the league. Unai Emery will obviously want to get a result from this game, but given how Fulham can play and they have really good attacking potency. I mean, Bobby Reed, obviously Rodrigo Muniz up front has looked really good, and obviously with Armando Broja coming in, and even Jedi Robinson on the left hand side, like they have a lot of attacking quality. And I think it's going to be a case of just who's going to break first. I think it will be a draw, and I'm going to say it's going to be a 2-2. I think this is a very tricky game to assess because Luton have gotten huge results against Newcastle, Brighton and Everton. And while they did lose last week, they've looked a lot better. And I think the Sheffield United result was quite a blip. But I think they're going to come back into this, and especially with how they're going to be at home against Manchester United. I mean, that's something you dream about if you're a Luton fan. And while United have been in really good form now, against Villa, they weren't particularly great in terms of how they set up. I think they relied on Scott McTominay once again to bail them out. But we've seen the likes of Rasmus Højlund, Garnacho looking a lot better. I think this could be either a very dull game or a very entertaining game. I think how Luton set up and how they perform, they can really trouble United. Just given how well they've done against the likes of Newcastle and Brighton, I think United will want to instill a similar amount of control, and Luton will give them that because just given the magnitude of the two teams and the stature of each of them. Ten Hag has done really well now in the last few weeks. I don't know if he has a long-term future. It's just purely just going off of what I've read through reports and just how the general consensus from United fans. But I think this is going to be a really good test for him to kind of see how he can break down these smaller teams, because they've kind of had to be more reactive in recent weeks. And while I gave praise to Diogo Dalot, will he have the creative freedom down the left-hand side, to kind of face the likes of Alfie Doughty, who is very quick, and I think the wings are going to be a particularly difficult, place for United to defend, especially without Luke Shaw. They're going to maybe Wan-Bissaka will go out that left-hand side, or Victor Lindelof to slot back in there. I think it's going to be a high-octane game, and I just think Luton are going to cause a surprise. I'm going to go with a 2-2 draw. Both these teams have been in poor form, but Everton have the better head-to-head record against Crystal Palace. And while they're going to be at Goodison Park, I think they're going to have the upper hand here. Crystal Palace have been very poor, and it's not been really good for Roy Hodgson. I think a lot of fans have voiced their displeasure at the board, at Hodgson himself. Just given, and you can understand why their football hasn't been particularly great, and Eze and Elise haven't been fit enough to kind of make significant impact in the games. I think they're unfortunate not to kind of come out with a result against Chelsea, given how well they defended. But ultimately, they didn't pick up any points from that tie. And I think against this Everton team, they're going to want to get something because they are both in relegation battle. And it's mad to think that this is a relegation 6-pointer, given what's been going on. But with Everton looking set to potentially get another point deduction or some sort of punishment related to their financial year this past year alongside Nottingham Forest, I think Sean Dyche is going to inspire this team to pick up a result here. It'll be a very scrappy game, and I think it's going to come down to, again, a set piece or just a break in transition. So I'm going to go with a 1-0 win to Everton. Newcastle picked up a few good results this last few weeks, and I think it's been really promising for them, but I think they're still going to find this very difficult against a Bournemouth side who haven't been the greatest of form recently, but they've been really good. And while they're missing Philip Billing, which is a huge miss for them, Newcastle are still missing a lot of key players, particularly Joe Linton, Joe Willock, and they need obviously a lot of the players just to perform as well as they can. I think it's going to be a very difficult game for Newcastle. While it is at St James's Park, Bournemouth have shown to be really good against these kind of bigger teams, and given how porous defensively Newcastle have been, I think it's going to be a difficult day at home. Iraola has done really well, and I think Eddie Howe's in for a surprise here. I don't know why my heart just says it's going to be a 3-2 win to Bournemouth. Well, I think Sheffield United got a huge win over Luton last week, helping in the relegation battle. I think they're going to end up coming back down to earth against this Brighton team. Brighton obviously have Europa League to contend with in the knockouts, but given just the quality gap between the two teams, and like Brighton have a lot of injuries, but they have a good bit of depth, and I think with Fati coming back, he will probably feature more likely, or a starting role in a knockout game. I think they're going to have too much for this Sheffield United side, and while I think they're going to really make it really stingy for Brighton and allow them to contain, to keep the ball and just possess it throughout the time, I think they're just going to get broken apart, and I think it's going to be a 2-0 win to Brighton. Both teams have been in poor form recently, just picking up draws and losses in their last 5 games. Forest have looked a lot better kind of going forward, but they've still been very patchy defensively. They haven't been a lot better. They could have been a lot better, because I would have thought Nuno Espirito Santo would have kind of set them up, be a bit more pragmatic and a lot more difficult to break up. But they've had to rely on kind of countering, and when they counter and they lose possession, which seems to be happening more regularly, because they have so many gaps, because so many people bomb forward, they're going to get exploited. And I think against this West Ham team, it's going to be tricky, because while they do have a few players missing injured, Mohamed Kudus looks set to come back, following injury, and Paquetá, while he's still missing, they have enough in the likes of Ward-Prowse and potentially Soufal to do something for them. I think it could be a very dull game, because even though I'm giving praise to West Ham, they haven't looked great in recent weeks. It's obviously because of injuries, and I think just Calvin Phillips hasn't had the greatest start. Obviously, he's made 2 mistakes leading the goals, but I don't think that's the key issue. I think the issue is the system set up around him. That, like, James Ward-Prowse isn't a left winger. He has struggled to kind of make an impact because he isn't particularly quick. He's a central midfielder, and I think against this team, they're going to find it very difficult, because Nottingham Forest have a lot of pace, and while West Ham can be really good defensively, they haven't had that in recent weeks, and I think they're going to want to kind of be on this front foot against this Nottingham Forest side. I think this could be a bit of a goal fest, but not in a good way. I think it's going to be a 2-2 draw. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, take care.